In Illinois, there's a House bill called 0687. It is going to amend, if it passes and becomes law, the Firearm Owners Identification Card Act. If you live in Illinois and own a firearm, you need this card. Well, it provides that any person who owns a firearm in the state of Illinois shall maintain a policy of liability insurance in the amount of at least $1 million, specifically covering any damages resulting from negligent or willful acts involving the use of such firearms while it is owned by such person. So that's going to go through the legislature. Let's see what happens there. And a United Nations Human Rights Treaty that could prohibit children from being spanked or homeschooled, ban youngsters from facing the death penalty, and forbid parents from deciding their family's religion is on America's doorstep. In a moment, we'll talk with an expert from the parentalrights.org group, Michael Ferris, on this on Coast to Coast AM. This hour of Coast to Coast AM. Okay, as I just mentioned, the United Nations Human Rights Treaty that could prohibit children from being spanked or homeschooled, ban youngsters from facing the death penalty, and forbid parents from deciding their family's religion is on America's doorstep. But what's the meaning of all of this? Michael Ferris, chairman, founder of the Homeschool Legal Defense Association, chancellor of Patrick Henry College, and president of parentalrights.org. Michael has used his extensive experience in both politics and appellate litigation to defend parental rights and help grow the organization to more than 80,000 member families. Here he is on Coast to Coast this hour. Michael, thanks for coming along here.
George, it's great to be with you tonight.
Now, tell me about this treaty and what this means to us here in the United States.
19 years ago, the United Nations treaty called the Convention on the Rights of the Child was promulgated, and shortly after that, the Clinton administration signed it, but it was never sent to the Senate for ratification. Every nation in the world, except the United States and Somalia, have ratified the treaty, but most of the nations just view it as a moral obligation and don't take it particularly seriously. But if we ratified the treaty, under our supremacy clause, it becomes part of the highest law of the land. And moreover, we shouldn't go into treaties with the idea that we're going to just do it with a wink and a nod, that we should really be serious about it and plan to comply with whatever its provisions are. And so we need to understand this treaty, not think of it as altruism, and really look at it as binding law. And what it does is the big principle is this, that today in American law, before the government can tell a parent, we don't like your decisions, we're going to override your decisions, first they have to prove that the parents have harmed the child in some way, either abuse or neglect or something of that order. There's got to be proof of harm first, and then the government can step in. But under this treaty, the government can decide what it thinks is best for every single child in every situation you can imagine, without any necessity of proving harm first. So, for example, a case I handled in Washington State several years ago now, but Washington State for a season had state laws on the books that paralleled this treaty, but they've since changed the laws. But at the time, a 13-year-old boy went to public school social workers and counselors and complained about the amount of church his family went to.
Yeah.
They went Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night prayer meeting. And the social workers did an emergency removal. I went to court in the short hearing they had, like 24 hours later, and the only issue on the table for this family was how much church this boy should go to. And the judge said, you know what, I think once a week is enough for any 13-year-old boy. And that'd be fine if the judge only makes that decision for himself.
For himself and his own family, yeah.
But until there's proof of harm to the child, we shouldn't be overriding parents' decisions. So whether it's spanking or whether your kid has a Facebook account, take that as a specific example. There are specific communication rights of children under this treaty, and that you can't impose a child any limitation on their ability to communicate other than those that are required by law, and only those laws that are necessary for the preservation of democracy and order. And so that means, I've got a bunch of teenagers right now, and I let them have Facebook accounts, but I have very strict rules. You can't put your real name on it. You can't put anything that I think is revealing, and
right.
a photo and all this kind of stuff. You can't put your phone number. Well, none of those requirements that I place on them are required by law. And so if this treaty becomes law, I'm in violation of the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. My kids could go to a social worker, and the social worker could eventually take me to court, and they could remove any of these restrictions that I've placed on their Facebook accounts because they have rights under the treaty that supersede my direction as a parent.
And will it also supersede any rules and laws of states, for example?
Absolutely. Under our own Constitution, it says that any treaty that's ratified by the Senate becomes part of the supreme law of the land. It's the Supremacy Clause, Article 6, Clause 2. Anybody can go get the Constitution and look at it. And the reason the Founding Fathers put that in, with override state law with the supreme law of the land, is because they never imagined that we'd have treaties on what are essentially domestic subjects. They thought treaties would be diplomatic immunity, law of war, piracy on the high seas, and it's not right for states to interfere in what's truly international policy. And so they put that override in. But in our nation, virtually all law about children and families and parents is state law. And so by the very terms of our own Constitution, any state law, any state constitution that contradicts this UN treaty is automatically overridden. We've got it already built into our system that international law wins because, frankly, they're doing things the founders never imagined.
I've got a friend in St. Louis. She's got 2 kids. Her name's Chloe. She has never roughed up her kids at all. But she, like most parents, have been known to give the kid a little tiny swat on the hiney. Just enough to, like, scoot him around or say, hey, don't do that. But surely not a beating by any means. Just a little swat. Could that get the parent in trouble, or are we talking about true abuse?
No, we're talking about any spanking whatsoever. I mean, if a parent, takes their hand or takes a ruler or something and smacks their child on the bottom, and, let's say it hurts for 2 minutes. But if it hurts for 2 or 3 days, you've abused your kid. But if, just a light smack on the bottom, and I'm sure that almost all the listeners listening to us now, including me, received those smacks on the bottom from time to time when they were growing up, and I certainly deserved it, and probably most of them did too.
I got hit by nuns with rulers in my catechism classes.
Yeah, and
ouch.
So, ouch, indeed. But under this treaty, no parent can spank at all for anything, no reason. Nuns are certainly
now
helpful. Canada,
which we are very prevalent in right now, we're all over the place. They signed this.
They did, and Canada doesn't have the same supremacy clause problem that we have, where it's an automatic override. But they're under tremendous political pressure, as is Britain. Tremendous political pressure. Britain does not consider it automatically binding like our Constitution does, partly because Britain doesn't have a written Constitution. But the government of Wales, for example, was held by the UN to be in violation of the treaty because they allow parents to opt their children out of sex education programs in the public school if they want to, without first the government considering A, the child's wishes, and B, whether the decision made by the parent was actually in the best interest of the child. In fact, if we take what President Obama and his wife did, enrolling their kids in Sidwell Friends School.
Right.
Under American law today, the parents have an absolute right to enroll their kids.
Under this treaty.
No longer absolute. The parent's decision can be, first of all, if the kids object, then you're in front of some government agency deciding who's made the better decision, the parents or the children.
Michael, we're going to take phone calls with you. This is a remarkable story, the fact that the United Nations would have the right to step in, and you as a parent, you're out of luck. Michael Ferris.